Bonjour, Madame et Messieurs. And at this point, unfortunately, I have to switch to English because my French ends right here. I'm here replacing my colleague, Mr. Lars Knaup, and I'm going to talk about the analysis of the availability of sustainable biogenic gasoline in Europe coming from biomass. So let's have a short look at the agenda. First, we're going to consider the biomass potentials in theory, so the countries, the sources, as well as the boundary conditions. From there, we derive a technical potential, so we make some assumptions, we account for other uses. Then the biomass will be converted to sustainable alcohol. Here we have a look at production potentials as well as CO2 saving. And finally, we will convert the alcohol to sustainable gasoline. We'll talk about conversion pathways as well as production and CO2 saving potentials as well. But before that, let me shortly introduce the consortium who took part of it. The Energy and Bioproducts Research Institute at Aston University in Great Britain had a look at converting biomass into sustainable alcohol. The Institute of Technology at Hungarian University of Agriculture and Life Science had a look at the agricultural part as well, for example, energy consumption of harvesting, as well as try to give a little outlook of future developments of the agriculture, which unfortunately will not be part of those results yet. And finally, the Institute of Catalytics Research and Technology at Cultural Institute of Technology converted the sustainable alcohol to sustainable gasoline. So let's start with the considered potentials. We only looked at sources that are compliant with the RED III Annex 9, and we also considered only domestic biomass that is produced in Europe, and to prevent any discussions about interference with food supply, we only assumed second-gen biomass. So from there, we calculated a theoretical potential, which is the entire amount of biomass that is produced in the given area. And from there, we derived a technical potential, which considers the amount of biomass that is left after accounting for other uses, for example, heating or any others. We just included the demands of today. We're still working on future demand developments, so that will be part of probably a later version of it. So let's have a look at the countries we considered first. We covered a great share of Europe, but left out the Ukraine as a major contributor because of the unclear situation there. And the sources we considered are, first of all, agricultural residues, so mainly straw, perennial energy crops that are grown on marginal land, which I will explain a little bit later, forestry byproducts, animal feces, urine and manure, as well as processable waste. So let's start with the agricultural residues. So we assumed that the straw to grain ratio is similar for each crop for every country. We left out the use as animal feed fodder and mushroom production, as well as straw that is left or plowed into the soil to maintain the soil quality. So we assumed about 25% of the theoretical calculated potential can be technically used, which results in about 108 megatons of dry mass of biomass there. The energy crops on marginal land are considered as willow and poplar, so there's a huge amount of marginal land in the European countries and fallow land as well. So they are considered in the theoretical potential, but since fallow land is mostly left for a few years for the soils to recover and then recultivated with food crops, we left them out in the technical potential. So we only had a look at marginal land and tried to grow willow and poplar there. And we found out that 60% of the land is usable for willow and 90% for poplar. But since willow has the higher yield compared to poplar, we tried to maximize the part of the willow. So we assumed 60% of the land usable for willow and the remaining 30% for poplar, which results in a total of 174 megatons of dry mass there. So then the forestry byproducts. So we calculated the byproducts from wood production. So about 41% of the processed wood ends up as residues, split into sawdust as well as slabs and chips. And another 4% are lost due to shrinkage and other smaller losses. So you can say about 37% of the wood residues are available after accounting for already established bioenergy purposes, for example, electricity, for example, heating. And with this, you can say there's about 15% of the overall processed wood ending up in our calculations, which is about 17 megatons of dry mass. The animal feces, urine, and manure part can be shortened because, as you can see, there's almost nothing left after accounting for organic fertilizers, so we'll keep it short there. And finally, the processable waste. When considering recycling, incineration, composting, and energy, you have about 8% left usable, but if you divert landfill waste and energy recovery waste to produce methanol, the technical potential increases to about 42%, which results in a potential of 25 megatons of dry mass. So in summary, we have about 325 megatons of dry mass per year of biomass technically usable. As you can see, most of them are coming from either the perennial energy crops or the crop residues, and the others are only minorly contributing. From there, we have to convert them into sustainable alcohols. So we took typical production pathways that are compliant with RED II Annex 5. The crop residues are converted to ethanol, as it's stated there, and all the others are converted to methanol. So from there, we have about 72 megatons of methanol and 22.5 megatons of sustainable ethanol to work with in the next step. Then, as I already mentioned, we convert the alcohol to sustainable gasoline. So we had a look at mainly two processes. On the one hand, alcohol to gasoline, and on the other hand, alcohol to olefins and oligomerization. The results you see are based on the calculations done by the KIT with the calculation software Aspen Plus. You see an exemplary calculation with an alcohol feed rate of 1,000 kilograms per hour, and you see the outputs of mainly gasoline, but you see also see the byproducts, water, or depending on the process, LPG, fuel gas, or kerosene and diesel fuel as well. So in the last section, you see alcohol demand rate for every kilogram of gasoline. So how much alcohol is needed for gasoline? It will become important in a minute. We chose those two conversion processes either because the gasoline process are the obvious one, and the olefin and oligomerization processes are a little bit more flexible to produce not only gasoline but also other liquid fuels like, for example, kerosene. So now having the overall gasoline potential made from those alcohol feedstocks, as we already mentioned, depending on the process, you have about 33 to about 40 megatons of sustainable gasoline per year. I have to mention that the olefin and oligomerization processes are meant to be maxed out for gasoline, but they are flexible, as I said, and can be switched to, for example, produce more kerosene as well. So what about the costs? We have the share of the alcohol costs without directly influencing the overall fuel costs in the end. So as I said, the alcohol conversion rate directly feeds into the price. And obviously, the greater the plant, the lower the prices. A demonstrator plant on the left, 8,000 ton per year plant. With those, you have quite high prices, but if you're able to scale them up to industrial size, for example, a 1 or a 4 megaton plant, you can reach production costs that are similar to today's gas station prices. I know we're not talking taxation, we're not talking profits, we're just talking production costs here. And finally, let's talk CO2 reduction potentials. Here we also based all the calculations on the typical values from the RED II Annex 5 for crop residues and energy crops and the forestry byproducts, and we took into account another source to calculate the animal feces as well as the processable waste. And for comparative reasons, we took the fossil comparator of the RED II, which is 94 grams per megajoule. And you can see, depending on the pathway, you have about 78 to 84% of CO2 lowering there, but combining the ethanol and methanol pathways as well, you get about 80% for both pathways, the gasoline as well as the olefin and oligomerization pathway. But because the numbers are higher in absolute numbers for the olefin and oligomerization processes, the absolute saving potential here is higher as well. So let's conclude it. We found out that we can produce about 40 megatons of sustainable gasoline per year from those feedstocks, which is, to give an idea, about 49% of the overall fuel consumption in the countries we looked at in 2022. And we calculated about 79 million vehicles. For comparison, there are about 250 in the European Union. But you can fuel about 79 million vehicles per year with that. On my left, your right side, you can see a potential ramp-up scenario starting from today. You see the green dotted line. This is the biomass available. Obviously, the wastes are already available today, and it takes willow and poplar about 3 years to fully grow or to be harvestable. So we ramp up through year 2 and 3, and then we have full potential of the biomass available. The bigger problem is the investment or the scale-up of the production plants. As you can see, starting from today, we assumed that it takes about 5 years for a plant to be fully constructed or to be fully functional. So starting from today, the first plants will be ready in 2030, which will result in a CO2 saving of 383 megatons of CO2 equivalent up to 2035, and then another about 600 megatons up to 2040 with full capacity and full production. But you can also see that there's a long-term market demand. For example, if you also consider the other purposes or the other usabilities for the biomass, for example, kerosene, when using flexible production pathways, and it does not interfere with the ramp-up of the e-mobility. They can go hand in hand and go for additional CO2 saving. So the earlier everything will be ramped up, obviously, the higher the GHG savings are. And as I said, the flexibility of the processes allows for different markets and applications, which gives investors a little bit more security to invest. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Nico. We'll take some short questions. Jean-Baptiste et Anne. Tu as levé la main premier.
Okay. Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. So you mentioned it was a question, but you already raised it. So the cost of production is a cost without any taxation. So the gap would be significant. But more precisely on your presentation, was it limited to Germany regarding the feedstocks? Because the fuel consumption, 80 million tons, according to me, it's the German, not the European volumes of fuel for cars or oil products. And the second one, in your feedstocks, did you consider the competition with biogas?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Let me start with the first one. I think it's the fuel it's the fuel consummation in 2022 for all the European countries. So, yeah. Megatons, did I say megatons or megajoule? Let me think. Maybe I messed it up, sorry. Okay. Huh? Yeah, exactly, gasoline, that has to be mentioned, gasoline only.
So would be diesel, gasoline?
We didn't, diesel is not part of it for the moment. And could you please repeat your second question?
Competition with biogas for the feedstock.
We are still working on possible interferences with other usages, especially in the future. These are unfortunately not part of the results yet.